UConn was in the nation's capital on Thursday night, and they came away with a perfect win. We'll summarize. This is Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday night, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On UConn. I am Matt Shonvisky, a two-time graduate, tenure credential media member, and host of the only daily UConn sports podcast, Locked On UConn. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in the world. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and thank you for making this your first listen each and every single day. On today's show, we will summarize tonight's UConn women's basketball win over Georgetown. Then, it's 41 straight wins over the Hoyas. We will put that into context and talk about what exactly that significant trend means. And finally, football continues to turn heads in the portal. Ohio State defensive end coming in, helping bolster the UConn front seven. We'll talk about that in our final segment. But first, we are talking women's basketball as UConn absolutely dominated Georgetown 83-42. The first half was absolutely dominant to a point where Geno Auriemma, heading into the halftime break in the halftime interview, couldn't really find anything to critique his team about. There was a 5-minute stretch that, things could have been a little better. Blanca could have been a little better tonight. But at halftime, it was a 31-point margin. UConn doubled them up in the first quarter, 20-10. In the second quarter, 31-10. In 10 minutes. 31-10. 51-20 at the break. And Sarah Strong had a spectacular half. She had a spectacular night. No surprise, filling up the stat sheet once again. She led the way, 25 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals. Led the team in points, rebounds, and assists. Again. So here in her sophomore year, she continues to improve. She continues to get better and better and better and instill her will in these games. AZ, back home in D.C., her final appearance against Georgetown on the road, 19 points. She put up 19 shots. She didn't shoot lights out. She was 8 of 19 from the field. She was 3 of 12 from 3. But 6 rebounds, 5 assists in her final appearance back home. 12 points from Sarah Williams. I think that's the first time she's in double figures in quite some time. She was solid. 3 of 3. Didn't miss a shot all night. 3 of 3 from the field, 6 of 6 from the line. And my goodness gracious, you know what I've been nitpicking early on in the season. It was the free throw line, right? 11 of 11. Perfect night from the free throw line earlier tonight. The one area of concern for me, third quarter, they come out of that great first half. Don't shoot well. Get some turnovers there. 9-8. They only scored 9 points in the third quarter. And they only beat Georgetown by 1 in that 10-minute stretch. Before turning it back on in the fourth, 23-12. Or excuse me, 23-14. So 83-42 final. 41-point margin. And I must say, if you're Vegas, I don't know, I don't pay attention to lines. If you're Vegas and it's a Big East matchup, 38 on average is probably the margin of victory heading in. If I'm Vegas, just assessing this team and just knowing how UConn absolutely dominates Big East opponents. I come on the show and I say, hey, this game's going to be 40-plus. Creighton, if you look back a couple shows. You look back at some other matchups, I say, oh, this one's going to be closer, maybe 25-plus. They are crushing every single Big East team that they have to a point where 35 plus, 38 plus, 40 plus. I mean, FanDuel, good luck. Because if you have a low line, UConn's absolutely going to crush it. So I don't think we've seen anything like this. As the Huskies improved to 20-0 overall, 10-0 in the Big East, they are not going to lose a Big East game this season. I think it's crystal clear at this point. They're just too good. Their defense is too good. Their offense is too good. Their players are too good. Their coaching staff is too good. And for everything else that the Big East throws at them, UConn's got an answer. UConn probably has 5 answers for everything that they're going to get faced with in conference play. So, undefeated Big East. Well, so what does this mean? Because if you think back to when I first started this show, we had Bob Joyce on, maybe second or third show. And we were talking about, I posed a question. Because just watching this team and the depth that this team has, it's clear to me that they have a chance to match some of the all-time great teams here at UConn with going and running the table all the way through March and April and coming home with the hardware. And Bob Joyce agreed. And here we are, January 23rd, 20-0, 10-0 in conference. With your one real test the rest of the way until tournament time. On the horizon next Sunday, Tennessee. It's coming. It's coming. And it's the biggest rivalry in the sport. The matchups that have gone back and forth, the rivalry between Geno and Pat Summitt. It's not the same. It's still the rivalry of old. And now that Tennessee is improving and has gotten back, and they took down UConn last year. It's UConn's last loss. It's a huge matchup, which we are going to summarize all next week. We're going to preview all next week. We're going to bring Bob Joyce back on. We're going to reach out to Locked On Vols, and we're going to be talking Tennessee basketball, previewing that game from their perspective. Just so happens we also got a quarterback from there, so we'll be talking quarterback too. But the next week is going to be very heavily focused on women's basketball because we have the rivalry game. The rivalry in the women's game. And we're going to have a heavy focus there. And it's the test. It's going to, at this point in the season, where does UConn stack? We know how UConn fared against Michigan earlier this year. Huge lead. Michigan cut into it. I think UConn won by 2. Where do they stack up now on the national stage? We saw how they took care of business against Notre Dame on Monday. Back to blowing teams out here against Georgetown. But next Sunday is a big one, and we will give it the attention that it deserves. On the other side of the break, we are going to talk about the number 41 and exactly what that means. We'll be back. Back in on Locked On UConn, and we are still talking women's basketball. And their absolute, not just dominance in DC last night, but their dominance over Georgetown over the last 2 decades? Is it? So UConn won by 41 points last night. Heading into that game, UConn had won 40 straight games over Georgetown. So not only did they win the game by 41 points, they've now won 41 consecutive matchups with the Hoyas. 41. And that statistic absolutely blows my mind. Because do you know how long sustained success you need to have? And continuity and talent and overcoming injuries that are going to happen. This is a 2-decade-long run where UConn has not lost to Georgetown. 41 games. It just speaks to the consistency that Geno Auriemma has brought to this basketball program. And he's unmatched. We know. Talked earlier about the interview I had with Bob Joyce when I first started this show. We talked about his legacy and how he's been here since the mid-'80s and what he's built and how we're never going to see something like this again. You are never going to see a team beat another team by 41 straight times. It's just not going to happen. You can be I don't care what type of talent you have, there's something along the way that's going to happen. The UConn men could play DePaul 41 straight times. The worst team in the current men's basketball conference. But I guarantee you sometime over the next 41 games, if they continue to play for 41 games, DePaul's going to win one. It's just going to happen. They're not going to rattle off 41 consecutive wins. Name any other team, name any other professional sports team at the highest level, playing the worst team, you're going to run into a wall. And Georgetown is 11-8. They're not a losing team this season. They have not been a losing team historically. Yes, they're 4-6 in the Big East, but it's not like they're 0-10. It's not like they're 0-19 overall. They are over 500. Yet, UConn continues to steamroll these types of opponents. I know there was an argument at one time, is UConn's dominance bad for the game of women's basketball? The answer is clearly no, because as UConn's continue to dominate and they go on the road and they have a chance to play in front of fans, they make new fans. They make new young fans of the sport. And those young fans, if you're girls, will go and pick up a basketball and hone their game off of what they see UConn doing. And the more that happens, the more that get involved in the game, and the more that UConn dominates, the more the high-level opponents will work and strive to recruit and compete to defeat UConn. And that lifts the sport. It lifts it up. The top level of the sport is better today than it's ever been. It's more competitive today than it's ever been. At the top level, Texas, South Carolina, Tennessee, Notre Dame, Duke, North Carolina, across the board. The high-level teams, you've seen what Iowa was able to do. And what's happening and been happening down in South Carolina is spectacular. You've historically had Stanford, UCLA, USC, Maryland. There were perennial good teams. Louisiana Tech used to be a dominant team on the women's scale, on the national scale. LSU now, right? As this game continues to grow, so does the competition nationally. And that's only a good thing from the women's sport. And I don't think that happens unless you had this dominant UConn run from the mid-'90s through the 2010s all the way to today. But 41 straight. It's never going to happen again. And I don't know how long Geno's going to be here, but enjoy the ride. UConn should enjoy the ride because it's a one-time thing. Will there be sustained success post-Geno? I think so. Just look at how Tennessee's been able to come back. Just look at some of these other schools that have been able to recover when losing coaches. Just look at the men's team after Jim Calhoun retired. They're now back at the top level, maybe better than they've ever been. So enjoy the ride. It's been absolutely spectacular to watch from afar. Somebody growing up was born in the mid-'80s, being able to grow up and see and remember the first run in 95 and watch every step of the way what Geno's done with this program. It's something to behold. And I don't think we should take it for granted. We should not take it for granted. So being able to talked earlier about, hey, every Big East game, FanDuel is going to have a line that says UConn by 35 plus, UConn by 38 plus, UConn by 40 plus. The amount of work and the effort, the blood, sweat, and tears to build this program into that juggernaut is just something to behold. It's a credit to Geno. It's a credit to Chris Daly. It's a credit to his staff. It's a credit to the players that have come through here. It's a credit to the fans. It's a credit to the school. To, in the midst of NIL and investments into programs, UConn having the courage to invest in women's basketball. Because it's helped the sport. It's driving the sport forward. It's making the sport more competitive. And listen, UConn being able to dominate is just a sight to behold. So as we turn the page to next week, Tennessee's not the next game. There's obviously a game in between. But next week, we will be focused on the matchup with Tennessee. But on the other side of this break, Jason Candle and the football staff continue to turn heads with the recruiting that's happening in the portal. We will talk about that on the other side. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is easier than ever to just hand things over and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. Live in Connecticut, work in another state, they will have you covered. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. The taxes off your plate, take taxes off your plate, and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. That's TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Back in for our final segment here on Locked On UConn, and we are switching gears to UConn football as Jason Candle and the staff continue to pull in Power 4 transfers via the transfer portal. And the biggest one, I will say, and perhaps maybe outside of quarterback, perhaps the biggest one in my mind in terms of bringing in a new player happened earlier this week. And he's coming from Ohio State. And it's a defensive end that I'm focused on. And I'll tell you why. So Joshua Mickens coming in. Ohio State, like I mentioned. He's a defensive end that's 6'5". We have not had a player to be able to come off the edge and go get opposing quarterbacks for a very long time. Some of it has to do with the type of scheme UConn was running. When you have 3 down linemen, you need those linemen to be big, heavy. When you switch to a 4-3, that's when you start to get into the longer, taller, more athletic, quicker off the edge defensive linemen. UConn had that a bit with Langston Hardy a few years back, who ultimately transferred to Wake Forest. Kevin Hardy's son, former All-Pro with Jacksonville. But this one reminds me a lot of the Cody Brown, Lindsey Witten type of guys coming off the edge, fast, able to get around tackles, able to get around tight ends who are coming to chip and be able to win their one-on-one matchup with speed off the edge and get the quarterback. It's something that's been really lacking here for UConn over the years. And a lot of it, like I said, has to do with the approach and the scheme that UConn's defenses have been playing with. So it started with the mid-2010s. You're kind of in mostly a 3-down set. Sometimes you had 4-down linemen with that staff, with Coach Poindexter and his defense. Then you had Randy Edsall's experiment with the 3-4. Then you brought in Lou Spanos again, or excuse me, a 3-3-5 with Billy Crocker. And then you brought in a 3-4 with Lou Spanos. And then with Jim Mora, you had a mix and match. They ran their own defense, kind of like a 3-4. And then you had your 3-3-5 with Matt Brock here. UConn has not played a prototypical 4-3 front in a very, very long time. And it goes back to those teams, like I mentioned, where you have those defensive ends with speed off the edge. And to me, in this day and age, there's been so much shifts to get more speed on the field. You got to have smaller guys, 3-3-5, 3-4, 4-2-5. You could play with more speed with quick guys up front. And I like getting after the quarterback. And I like having traditional linebackers at the second level to shut down run games, to come in on blitzes and dominate and deliver hits on a quarterback. Despite offenses and the huge transition of up-tempo offense and gimmicky offense, if you're an old school coach, a lot of what you see now is called gimmicky. I remember talking to Coach Edsall when he was here the second time, and Rhett Lashley had just moved on. This was after the first year he was back. We're entering 2018, and we used to talk. I used to get calls from him coming out of work. Something would happen. He'd give me a call and say, hey, just a heads up, this is coming. This player's transferring. This is my thoughts on it. This is where I think he's going to be. This is why we're making a change defensively. And we would talk openly like that on a regular basis. And I remember a conversation where he made some comments about the offense that Rhett had here at one point, where when he brought in Coach Dunn to take over the offensive staff, he said, hey, we're not going to be running that fast up-tempo stuff where we're clapping to get the ball, where we're going to be actually having a snap count, and we're not going to be clapping. And he made it a point to say we're not going to be clapping to snap the ball. I think that he's an old school guy, as you know, and the way the game has switched to this, some can call it up-tempo gimmicky, but I mean, it's evolving with the times, right? And I think some of these coaches that are of the old school mindset have trouble adjusting to the new ways of working, just like in any profession. You're set in your ways and you have a way of doing things and you don't want to change. And I think just looking back, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here from what I want to talk about, but I think just going back and looking at legacy. I know it didn't work out with Coach Edsall here the second time, but UConn is not where it is today without him. And what he was able to do when he first arrived at UconnFootball and actually built this program from the ground up. The stadium's not here. The football facility certainly isn't here without Randy Edsall. The players that were recruited his first run here, the Darius Butlers, the Tyvon Branch, the Cody Brown and Lindsey Witten that I talked about, Kendall Reyes, Twan Martin, Donald Brown, Jordan Topman, Dan Orlovsky, Kashif Moore, on and on and on. Jeremy Davis, to Bucky Jones Jr., who ultimately transferred. Just it goes on and on. Anthony Sherman, Scott Lutris, Greg Lloyd Jr., Jesse Joseph, C.O. Moore. I mean, these are all guys that went on into the NFL. And there's more. There's a lot more. Larry Taylor. Just the legacy that Randy Edsall brought. This program is not and did not accomplish what it did without him. So I just wanted to touch on that. And it just came into my mind because this defensive end reminds me of some of those that he had brought in. But elsewhere in the transfer portal, you'll have other P4 transfers. So Deshaun Reeder, running back from Northwestern, P4, Big Ten, coming in here. And I know Northwestern fans aren't happy about losing Reeder because of what he did and what he produced. Offensive lineman, how's this for a name? Coming in from Virginia Tech, the Hammer, Hans Hammer, originally from Cologne, Germany. Coming to UConn from Vatek. Terrence Moore, another offensive lineman, began his career at Pitt. Transferred to Toledo, coming here. And then two others also coming from Toledo. Chamberlain Campbell, a defensive lineman, and Terrence Moore, what we just talked about. Tyler McKinstry, a defensive back, originally from Atlanta, coming in from Toledo as well. So you got two more defensive linemen, two more offensive linemen, two more defensive backs as the final addition since the last time we talked was Zion Parrott, a defensive back from FAU. Saw firsthand what UConn's all about last couple seasons. So UConn continues to fill out its roster. They're now up to 70 new players. If you think back to what I've been saying, you have at least 71 spots to fill out due to graduation, due to transfers of UConn's own. But listen, there's so much to like. And I go back to the uptick that we're seeing in recruiting. The type of players that are coming in. Reeder, Northwestern. Mickens, Ohio State. Hammer, Virginia Tech. Terrence Moore, Pitt. In this offensive line, you are going to see some massive bodies. I don't know how it's going to play out. We will start to see and watch during spring ball to pick through all this list of 70 about, hey, who's set up to be first, second team, who's getting the most reps, how do they look? Been in and around the game for a better part of 16 years now, even more so. All the way back to 2003, so 23 years. We'll be able to come and see first couple practices. Okay, this guy, this group of 10, these are probably your top 10 offensive linemen. These couple quarterbacks are probably the ones that are truly competing for the job. This group of running backs, that's more wide open because things can give and take. Scenarios change throughout the course of a game, throughout the course of a season. But we want to start seeing the talent. It's great to talk about on paper how this has been in a recruiting uptick. But we got to see the talent live, at least in practice, before talking and confirming that, hey, the players coming in that Coach Kendall and his staff have identified are truly the uptick that we believe on paper they are. But there's so much to like. And I'm very interested to see defensive backs. Because to me, there's been some players that left and went to big programs like Michigan State, like West Virginia. But I was left wanting more, even from last year's defensive back group. But what's not to like about what Coach Kendall and staff are doing? So on this Thursday night, we will wrap here. So with that, thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On UConn. Please hit the like and subscribe button. And for a second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. And as we move forward and close the week, obviously, Saturday afternoon, the big matchup, UConn-Villanova on the men's side. We will preview that on Friday and Saturday morning. Stay tuned here to Locked On UConn for that. And as always, go Huskies!